The morning my stepmother left for Las Vegas, she spent 40 minutes curling her hair. She did not say goodbye to me. I was 13 years old, standing in the hallway outside the bathroom, watching steam drift under the door. My dad had been gone for 11 days by then, a work trip to Portland that had turned into something else, something nobody explained to me directly. He just stopped coming home. His name was still on the mailbox, his coffee mug was still on the counter, but his shoes were gone from the rack by the front door, and that was how I knew. My stepmother, Lee, had been in my life since I was 7. She wasn't cruel the way people imagine cruelty. She didn't yell, she didn't hit. She simply moved through our house in Scottsdale, Arizona, the way a person moves through a hotel, using the amenities, leaving no trace of care. She had a group of friends from her spin class, and a skincare routine that took longer than most dinners. She worked part-time doing bookkeeping for a friend's landscaping company. She had opinions about everything except me. When my dad was home, there was at least a buffer, someone to ask how school went, even if the question was mostly reflex. But with him gone, and no explanation of when or whether he was coming back, I had learned quickly to stay out of Lee's way. To fold myself small. To not require things. 2 days before she left, she called me into the kitchen and set a Ziploc bag on the counter. Inside, it were 4 $20 bills and a note with the Wi-Fi password, as if I might have forgotten it in the 6 years we'd lived there together. $80, she said. That's for the week. Don't waste it on junk. 1 week? I asked. She was already walking away. Maybe a little longer, she said. Sasha's having a thing in Henderson and I might stay a few days after. You know how to make pasta. She said it like a compliment, like I should be proud of my ability to boil water. I was 13. I had been making my own meals since I was 9, packing my own lunches since 5th grade, doing my own laundry since the machine broke and nobody scheduled the repair for 3 weeks. I didn't know these were warning signs at the time. I thought I was capable. I thought capable was the same as fine. The morning she left, a rideshare came at 6:45. I heard the wheels on the driveway. I heard the door. I did not hear her voice. I stood at my bedroom window and watched the trunk close over a weekend bag that was significantly larger than a weekend required. The car pulled out. The neighborhood was still and beige and quiet the way Scottsdale suburbs are at 6:45 in the morning, and I stood there until I couldn't see the car anymore, and then I stood there a little longer. I ate cereal for breakfast. I went to school. The first few days were almost manageable. I had the $80. I had the pantry, which had a box of pasta, some canned tomatoes, a half-empty bag of rice, and a jar of peanut butter that was down to the last inch. I had a cell phone and a school schedule and the routine of both to hold the shape of a normal week. I texted her on day 3. Just checking in, I wrote, which is a thing I had learned to say instead of I am alone and I don't know when you're coming back. She replied 6 hours later, having so much fun. The pool here is amazing. There was a photo attached. Lee and a woman I didn't recognize, both in sunglasses, both holding something frozen in pink. I put my phone face down on my desk and stared at the ceiling for a while. By day 5, the $80 was mostly gone. Scottsdale in July requires air conditioning the way fish require water. It's not optional, it's survival. And I'd made 2 grocery runs that ate through cash faster than I'd planned. Milk, bread, more peanut butter, a bag of apples, a box of granola bars for breakfast because cereal had run out. I stood at the kitchen table on day 5 and counted what I had left, $14 and some change. I did the math on a piece of notebook paper because writing it down made it feel more manageable. 3 days of food, maybe 4 if I stretched it. I didn't know how long she'd actually be gone. I called her, not texted, called, which I almost never did because calling felt like admitting something was wrong. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. She picked up on the second ring with the flat tone of someone interrupted. "What's wrong?" she said. Not a question. I explained about the money. I explained that I was almost out and didn't know when she was coming back. There was a pause. The sound of somewhere loud and climate-controlled in the background. You went through $80 in 5 days? I tried to explain the groceries, the gas station run for a phone charger when mine broke, the basics of keeping a person alive in a desert in summer. You're being dramatic, she said. There's food in the pantry. Figure it out! She hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Then I opened the pantry. There was a can of chickpeas, half a bag of lentils, some bouillon cubes, and the empty peanut butter jar I hadn't thrown away yet. There was a bottle of soy sauce and a box of baking soda and things that are not food by themselves. I made lentil soup that night. It was fine. It was not the point. What I did next was not something I planned. I just found myself going to my closet and pulling out the old iPad my real aunt, my dad's sister, had given me 2 birthdays ago when she upgraded. I opened the camera. I turned it to face me. I looked terrible. I knew I looked terrible. I said it anyway. Today's day 5. My stepmother is in Las Vegas. I have $14 and the food situation is getting thin. I'm not sure when she's coming back. I'm documenting this because my neighbor Mr. Hadley. I stopped. I hadn't talked to Mr. Hadley yet. I turned the camera off. The next morning I did. His name was actually Raymond, but I'd called him Mr. Hadley since I was 7 because that's how Lee had introduced him and the habit stuck. He was 68, retired from the postal service, and he spent most mornings on his back patio drinking decaf and doing the newspaper crossword by hand. He had a beagle named Pretzel who barked at me every time and then immediately wanted to be petted. I knocked on his door at 8:30. He opened it, looked at my face, and said, "Come in," without asking any questions. That was the kind of person he was. I sat at his kitchen table and told him almost everything, not the part where I cried, because I didn't cry. But the rest of it. Lee leaving, the money running out, not knowing when my dad was coming back from whatever Portland had turned into. He listened, with his coffee cup held in both hands, and didn't interrupt once, which is a rarer thing in adults than it should be. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your dad. Have you been able to reach him?" I had been texting him. He replied sporadically, short messages, "Fine, honey, talk soon. I'm handling some things." The replies had a quality I couldn't name at 13 but can now. They were the replies of a person who knows they are failing someone and cannot look directly at that failure. Mr. Hadley set his coffee down. "I'm going to bring you dinner tonight," he said. "Don't argue with me. And I want you to write down everything. Dates, what you eat, how much money you have, what she says when you call, everything." He paused. "Not because I'm telling you to get anyone in trouble, because the truth needs receipts." I wrote it all down. His daughter, who lived about 20 minutes away, started dropping off groceries every few days. She never made a big deal of it. She'd leave a bag on the porch with a text that said just some extras. There were never just extras in the bag. There were complete meals, snacks, fresh fruit, a rotisserie chicken one time that I ate over the sink while it was still warm, because I hadn't had real protein in days and I didn't care about looking dignified about it. School started its summer session that week. My stepmother had enrolled me in a summer bridge program months earlier. Not because she believed in my academic development, but because a child in a program is accounted for between 8 and 2 and requires less supervision. I hadn't thought much about it at the time. I thought about it a lot that week. On day 8, I nearly passed out during a group activity. Not dramatically, just sat down very fast on the gym floor and put my head between my knees and waited for the swimming sensation to stop. My teacher, Ms. Ferrier, was there before I looked up. She was the kind of teacher who noticed things without making you feel surveilled by the noticing. She got me water, got me a granola bar from her own bag, and walked me to the nurse's office herself. The nurse asked the standard questions. She asked when I'd last eaten a real meal. She asked if there was an adult at home. I said yes, which was technically true. I was an adult in training. I was becoming quite good at it. Miss Ferreira was still there when the nurse stepped out for a moment. She sat next to me on the cot and didn't say anything immediately, which I appreciated. Then she said, You can tell me what's actually going on, or you don't have to. Either is okay. But I want you to know I'm going to believe you. Nobody had said that to me before. I want you to know I'm going to believe you. I hadn't realized until that moment that I'd been afraid of the opposite. I told her, not the performance version, not the minimized everything is fine version, the actual version. She asked if she could make a call. I said yes. Lei called me that night. The register in her voice was the specific register of a person who was furious and trying to manage it. The school called someone, she said. What did you tell them? I told her I had spoken to my teacher. I told her I hadn't said anything that wasn't true. There was a silence. Then, when I get home, we're going to have a serious conversation about loyalty. You don't go airing family business to strangers. I said okay. I got off the phone and opened the iPad and recorded exactly what she had just said. I recorded the date, the time, the words as close to verbatim as I could get them. I kept my voice level. I had learned by then to keep my voice level. What I recorded over the following days was not dramatic in the moment. It was methodical. I showed the refrigerator, mostly empty. I showed the bathroom scale, which I stepped on every few days, and the number that kept going down. I recorded receipts from the dollar store where Mr. Gozel, Hadley's daughter, had given me a 20 for a one-time emergency run. I recorded the date and time of every call I made to Lee and every call she failed to pick up. I recorded the date and time of every text from my dad and the increasing time gaps between them. I recorded 26 days of it. A woman named Miss Tran arrived at our house on a Tuesday morning. She was from Child Protective Services. She had a calm, methodical way of moving through a space, not searching exactly but seeing. She opened the refrigerator. She looked at the calendar on the wall, which still had Lee's trip marked as a long weekend. She looked at me. "Do you have anything you'd like me to see?" she asked. I brought her the iPad. She watched every video. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and watched her face while she watched the screen. She had a very controlled expression. It only shifted slightly. Once, when the video from day 11 played. That was the one where I stood on the bathroom scale and said the number out loud and then said I started at 107, and then said the date, and then turned the camera off. When the last video ended, she closed the iPad carefully and set it on the table. "You're very organized," she said. "That matters." "Ben," she asked me something no adult had asked me in 26 days. "What do you need right now?" I said I needed to know if I was going to be okay. She said she was going to make sure of it. The legal process that followed was, as these things go, clear and well documented. Ms. Strand filed her report. The program director at my summer session had already filed one. The school nurse had filed one. 3 independent reports from 3 separate mandatory reporters, all within 48 hours of each other, created a situation that was difficult for anyone to characterize as a misunderstanding. The records obtained through subpoena were detailed. Lee had been in Nevada for 29 days. She had spent across hotel charges, restaurant tabs, spa bookings, and what appeared to be a fairly significant stretch at a casino called the Palms, just under $31,000. She had 2 credit cards she had not mentioned to me. She had made 1 phone call to our home landline on day 12, which lasted 4 minutes. The credit card she had given me, the one she said to use only for emergencies, was a card she had reported lost 3 weeks before the trip. It had been deactivated before she handed it to me. This was not a mistake. The record showed the deactivation date. My dad in Portland had not known she was gone. He thought I was with her sister. When Ms. Tran reached him by phone, he was on a flight back to Arizona before the call ended. He arrived at 8 in the morning, looking like he hadn't slept, and he sat on the porch steps for a long time before he came inside. I watched him from the window. I didn't know yet how to feel about him. That was a conversation that would take years, not hours. Leigh came home on a Thursday. She had been notified by her attorney that she needed to return, which she apparently interpreted as an inconvenience rather than a consequence. She arrived in a rideshare with 2 large bags and a tan and a pair of sunglasses pushed up on her head. She came through the front door and stopped. Miss Tran was standing in the living room. Two officers from the Scottsdale PD were standing in the living room. My aunt, my real aunt, my dad's sister Claudette, who had driven 3 hours from Tucson the moment my dad called her, was sitting on the couch next to me. Lee looked at all of us, then she looked at me. She started to say something about a misunderstanding. Miss Tran opened her folder and began to read from it. She read the dates, she read the amounts, she read the deactivation date on the credit card, she read the weight documentation, she read a line from one of my videos, not to embarrass me, just to establish the record. She read it without any particular inflection, the way facts sound when they are simply facts. Nobody in the room said anything in Lee's defense. The officers were very professional about it. They explained that she was being taken in for questioning related to a child endangerment and child neglect complaint, and that she had the right to contact an attorney. Leigh kept looking at me the whole time they were explaining this, with an expression I still think about sometimes. It wasn't shame exactly. It was closer to disbelief that this had been allowed to happen to her. She accepted a plea agreement 4 months later. Felony child neglect, a suspended sentence, 2 years of probation, mandatory parenting classes, community service hours. Her attorney argued for leniency. The judge noted the documented weight loss, the deliberately deactivated card, and the 26 days of video evidence and was not particularly moved by the argument for leniency. Her parental rights, step-parental rights, technically, but they had been formally established, were terminated at the family court hearing the following month. My dad and I are more complicated. He didn't abandon me the way she did, but he left in a different way, a quieter way, and the two of us have spent the years since then figuring out what that means and what we owe each other. He's in therapy now. We talk on the phone every Sunday. It's not what I needed when I was 13, but it's something, and I've learned to hold what something is worth without expecting it to become everything. Aunt Claudette took guardianship while everything got sorted. Her apartment in Tucson had 1 bedroom and a pull-out couch and walls covered in these framed maps of places she wanted to go someday. She made coffee in a French press and always offered me a cup even though I was 13, and the fact that she asked every time instead of just deciding for me felt significant in a way I didn't have words for yet. She came to every parent-teacher conference with a notebook and actually wrote things down. She came to my swim meet in October and stood on the wrong side of the pool the entire time and cheered loudly and embarrassingly for every single heat whether I was in it or not. She put my school schedule on her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cactus and referred to it during dinner like it was important information, because to her it was. I am 28 now. I finished a degree in social work and then went back for my master's. I work for a family advocacy nonprofit in Phoenix. I sit across from kids in offices not unlike the one where Ms. Tran sat across from me, and I ask them what they need right now, and I mean it exactly the way she meant it. Last year I got a letter. It came through a system I'd registered with, one of those mutual consent registries for people who've been through family court proceedings. It was from Lee. She said she'd been in therapy for a long time. She said she understood, now, what she'd done and hadn't done. She said she was sorry. She said she was proud of who I'd become. I read the letter twice. I put it in a drawer. I haven't written back. I don't know yet if I will. The decision is mine to make in my own time, and that is something I had to learn, slowly and at some cost, that I was allowed to have. She handed me a dead credit card and $80 and drove to Las Vegas for a month and assumed that being young and quiet and used to managing alone would be enough to keep me from speaking. She was wrong about the math on that one. She was wrong about most of it. I've been asked in the years since what made me start recording. The honest answer is that I wasn't sure anyone would believe me otherwise. Mr. Hadley said the truth needs receipts, and I was 13 and scared, and I believed him. He was right. The receipts were what made it real to everyone else. But I already knew it was real. I was living it. I just needed a way to make sure the world knew too. If you have ever found yourself making yourself smaller to fit inside someone else's convenience, eating less, needing less, asking for less, apologizing for the space your actual existence requires, I want you to know that is not the same as being easy to love. It is only ever the same as being easy to leave. That is not a distinction I understood at 13. I understand it now, and I am not quiet about it anymore. I think about Lee sometimes, not with bitterness the way I used to, but with a kind of clinical curiosity. She made choices that had a logic to them, even if that logic was entirely self-serving. She calculated that a quiet kid who had already learned to need very little would simply continue needing very little. She was not wrong about my history. She was wrong about what I'd do with it. That's the thing about consequences. They're not punishment handed down from somewhere outside. They're just the natural shape of what we set in motion. Lay handed me a dead credit card and got on a plane, and what she actually set in motion was 26 days of documentation, 3 mandatory reporter filings, a subpoena, and a family court hearing. She built the case against herself. I just kept the receipts. Mr. Hadley told me the truth needs receipts, and I believe that more now than I did at 13. Not because the world is fair, it isn't reliably, but because clarity is a form of protection. Knowing what happened, being able to name it precisely, being able to show it to another person and have them see it the same way you do, that is not a small thing. That is the difference between a story someone can dismiss and a record no one can argue with. I learned that at 13, sitting on a bathroom floor weighing myself every few days and writing the number down. I learned it from a 68-year-old retired postal worker who did the crossword in pen and believed that a scared kid deserved the tools to be believed. What I carried out of those 26 days wasn't just survival. It was something harder to name, a kind of moral clarity that I don't think I would have found any other way. I understood, by the end of it, the difference between people who do the right thing because it's convenient and people who do it because they can't look themselves in the eye if they don't. Ms. Ferreira didn't have to sit with me on that cot. She had a class to get back to. She stayed anyway. That stayed with me too. I work with kids now who are where I was, scared, minimized, convinced that their needs are an imposition on everyone around them. The first thing I try to give them, before resources, before referrals, before anything practical, is the same thing Ms. Ferreira gave me. I want you to know I'm going to believe you. It costs nothing to say. It changes everything to hear. What I know now, at 28, that I didn't know at 13, resilience is not the same as toughness. Toughness is what you perform for people who aren't paying attention. Resilience is what you build quietly. In the days when no one is watching, when you're writing things down and staying steady and making lentil soup and not giving up on the idea that the truth, stated clearly and documented carefully, will eventually be enough. It was enough, it is enough, and I am still not quiet about it.